I don't know where the thing is.
Live. The link is at the top of your screen. Oh, you're on your mobile.
No, I'm on mobile.
I don't know.
Um,
I
yeah,
think it's under a link.
one one of our
Hey.
mutual friends, he's always asking me, how is it that you guys can do these things because you're so different politically? I'm like, we're not different politically. What are you talking about?
Michael Gitverin is the David Sachs of AI Sigmas.
Yeah, maybe that's it. Although I definitely don't have his LP portfolio.
No,
Um,
he's got a lot
all
of
right, so
crypto.
let's talk about Gemini. Why do we care about Gemini? I personally don't. Google pissed me off the last 15 years, so I don't care about what they do. Other
Yeah,
than it
that's what
makes
I tell
everyone
the
else
Google
cheaper.
employees. But they did release a new model, 2.5 Pro
Yeah.
Experimental, something or other, that is very good on all the metrics. And so people are talking about it. In particular, it's very cheap for the quality it is, and obviously
So
scalable.
let me ask this question. So Google was caught lying when they did their Gemini announcement originally. And so why do we believe that they're actually good at the metrics and they didn't just include the metrics in the training set?
It's a good question. Yeah, unclear. So far, mostly when people release models, metrics, they aren't gaming them so much.
Really?
Although this week they tested all the models on the new USA Mathematics Olympiad problems, and all the
Yeah.
models only got 5%, even though they claim like 90% on all the
See?
old tests. So
You
that's
see?
clearly training the test there.
Yeah. I think it's also like how everyone uses copyrighted works in their training set, but then says that they don't. It's like, man, I don't think that's true.
Well, they said they don't know. Like, what could be in it? How did Studio Ghibli come out? Oh, that's one thing we could talk about. Studio Ghibli
Yeah.
taking over.
Well, just the Studio Ghibli thing just remains to be seen that we are primarily visual, and visual is one of the most important ways to communicate ideas to people.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's super obvious, and I don't think people really anticipated the Studio Ghibli response, but it was kind of like a happy thing that happened for OpenAI. It made me feel good that they were relevant again. And then Grok somehow was able to pull off the same thing almost instantly.
Yeah.
So it was like, was Grok always able to do that? Did they push a patch? Was just purely like an AI fad, you know?
Yeah, it probably could inherently do it. I'm pretty sure OpenAI could always kind of do Studio Ghibli's close to that. I mean, I used to make Pixar images of people's photos, and it was pretty okay.
Yeah.
OpenAI is a little bit better now, but I think Sam Altman tweeted that he probably did do that on purpose. They're very good at PR. They're very good at sensational and spectacle, and so they probably did that on purpose. And they were smart about it. Might get them into some lawsuits, but they're used to that.
Yeah, well, they do have a lot of money and they do have high ground when it comes to the government. So one thing I'm always thinking about around enforcement is rules are really great in the middle of the distribution, but at the tail ends, they don't really work for reasons of societal stability. And so I'm quite interested with OpenAI's relationship with the NSA and the intelligence community, whether they can leverage that to just do whatever they want.
Yeah.
I know
Okay.
you're smiling, but they literally put the former head of the NSA on their board, and you don't do that
Right.
for no reason, okay? Like don't
Right.
don't make me out to seem like some conspiracy person.
Is that so that they could close more deals with the NSA, or do you think it has deeper implications?
Um, so I think Sam Altman is very similar to SBF in the sense that he understands how to play the game quite well at the top end. And if you look at WorldCoin and some of his previous ventures, he was very connected to that Bill Gates, Davos, WEF crowd. And so it makes sense from that playbook that you would do that. It was very similar to what Elizabeth Holmes did with Theranos,
Right.
and a lot of people do with those kinds of businesses. So, of course, it opens the question of, does OpenAI really have something there? Obviously, people way smarter than me have commented on that, but I think it would be a mistake to discount the move of bringing the government in as a first party participant by doing something like that,
Okay. Yeah, I
right?
mean,
Like
definitely going to be a big customer. Elon Musk, a
regulatory
lot of his
capture
money's
is the
from
thing.
government.
What was
Yeah.
that?
Started and still are paid for by the government. It's the only way to do big things.
What's
In
the only
some
way to
ways,
do big things?
that have the government pay for things like Tesla subsidies, climate subsidies,
Oh yeah.
SpaceX.
Well, I think again, this gets to the difference between a story about reality, and reality tends to be one adjacency away from the story of reality. So, for example, most of the
Yeah.
large tech companies of the last two cycles, which I would say is like post 1999 or even 1999 and then into today, they have very large government influence on them, if not outright creation. So Google is a function of the CIA research program, and Facebook had deep connections with the NSA since the very beginning, since literally the summer that they launched. Um, so, and you can go down the list, right? PayPal was no different from all the other money transmission companies. There were like hundreds of them. Why was PayPal allowed to um, participate in money laundering, but all the others, the government went after them? Was it a honeypot? Right? There's a lot of this and that in Silicon Valley, and we're very aware here on the ground of how the story of these companies is not really true from a sense of like how things actually happened. It's more like what people wished happened. And so I think in AI, where it's very clear that there's a geopolitical component, at least uh, so here's an interesting
Yeah, pretty
example that I think.
overtly from the beginning. Eric Schmidt got into it very
Yeah, and
quickly with
here's kind of an interesting thing, right? So the U.S. and the USSR both
Kissinger.
tried to go to the moon.
Kissinger wrote something with Eric Schmidt very
What
early
was
on
it?
in 2020.
What was
Kissinger with
that?
Eric Schmidt.
Yeah.
Eric Schmidt wrote an essay with Kissinger right before Kissinger passed away in 2023.
Wait, Kissinger's dead?
Yeah, so he did die in 2023. Yeah,
Okay.
which is thought AI revolution happened.
But anyway, I think let's say that AI just happens to be another relational database.
I'm gonna let you
Um,
tell your speech while I drop off the kids for a minute.
yeah. Okay. Are you going to listen though, so we can talk about it after? Because I don't feel like talking to the wall.
Okay, I'll listen.
All
Okay.
right. Great.
Oops.
Nope. Wrong way.
Swap.
So I think
Okay.
there's an interesting parallel here. When the USSR and the United States were peer competitors in the 1960s, we both wanted to continue to advance space exploration. And the United States and the USSR spent a lot of money on their civilian programs. Now, part of that was they wanted to develop intercontinental ballistic missiles. And to an extent, the Apollo program was also a big geopolitical move. And so there is something to be said about a big geopolitical strategy that allows people to align against it. And I think something similar you could be saying is happening with artificial intelligence, where it's now allowing us to address 50 years of lethargy in making decisions around manufacturing and uh, you know physical supply chains, mining, energy policy. So, for example, now all of a sudden, because we have all these AI need, now we're going to, speed run surge production of nuclear reactors and a bunch of other hydrocarbon based technologies that will increase the amount of energy that's available. So, this AI race with China, and it's not really clear like how you win the AI race with China. Like, I don't think that anyone can really articulate an end state. Um, because it's not a weapon in the same sense that a nuclear weapon is. It's a weapon more like in the sense that search engines are a weapon. And the resolution with the search engine weapons arms race was that the United States and the West controlled three, uh, Google and Bing being the most obvious. The Russians had one, which was Yandex, and then the Chinese had one, which was Baidu. And so that was how that WMD arms race in the early 2000s finished. but it wasn't a whole of society arms race. It was just around a specific technology, the most profitable technology ever created, in the case of Google. And so anyway, I'm curious to the extent that AI is being used as a geopolitical football, so that all of these other policies, which were a good idea, now have a certain urgency to them, right? And much like we have like the war on terrorism or the war on poverty or the war on drugs, the war to win AI is, number one, not a winnable war, and number two, not even clear what winning looks like. But you can always make point things like, oh, DeepSeek came out, and so US open source is behind. Or, China is able to field robotics that are doing flips in the field and have a much better gait and all of this than the US can. And that's due to their deep learning models. Or Tesla FSD is an order of magnitude better, maybe two, than the best, BYD, et cetera, Chinese car systems. And then China has that sort of a different cultural response to failure rates of technology. They're much finer, they're much happier with the technology killing people. And basically, institutionally, they care less about the individual. That's really true. I've been to China. And so, is that even really a race in the full self-driving versus not? But all of these things are AI races that we currently see. So let me pause there for a second and see if you're still on. My guess is not. So what else? What other interesting things should I talk about? We got into a big row in our group chat this morning because there's transition in society that I don't think that AI necessarily is accelerating, but it's definitely highlighting. And that's the transition from a Newtonian linear model of the world and understanding to a more Heisenbergian or quantum mechanical, quantum uncertainty model of the world, where you can't come up with some kind of linearization of reality as a model in order to make predictions. So like Robert Keynes, GDP formula is not very good in terms of designing policy, even though there's an entire discipline and field that do it. Instead, we have sort of like a quantum or Heisenbergian idea where you want to look at your perspective and then take a point snapshot in time. So you're looking at basically a multimodal polynomial that you're taking a point derivative at a point in time, and then you're using that as a way to orient yourself related to all the other entities making the same point representation in time. And sort of the way that this broke down in our group chat is we were talking about a subject where there's like a particular point of view by society, and I was taking a different point of view. And so on the one hand, you could say, okay, Michael's taking a minority position and it's not really relevant. And I'd be like, no, 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 because my position is going to flow through society like a wave. So if we think of ideas as being like viral memes, where they literally transit from one person to another, then you can draw a graph or a map of when a meme gets to a critical point that everyone believes it. And then because it's a wave, there's always, some early order propagation component to it. So you get people like Thiel saying, or whoever it was, maybe it was Gibson, I don't remember. It's not really important to me, but the future is already here. It's just unevenly distributed. So one way to think about that is that the propagation wave has started on the left side, if you think about the innovator's dilemma curve. And so maybe only 2% of people are aware of something, and then it takes some amount of time for that propagation to go through society. And the obviousness with which the artificial intelligences are deploying midwit level intelligence, so they're basically trying to take a macro view of the entire information space when they make some kind of conclusion, right? Which is centered around like 100, 105 IQ in terms of intelligence required to understand what they're talking about. It doesn't really allow for prediction in the sense that it doesn't account for this mimetic wave propaganda. So it discounts minority reports that become majority reports. So like a good example might be Europe is overly regulated, and it's difficult for them to innovate. And as a result of those two things, the testosterone levels and masculinity expression levels in Europe has been the lowest it's been in generations, which is why they're currently undergoing some form of cultural invasion and conquering. And at the same time, if you interview people who are in Gen Z in Germany, in Spain, in France, in the Netherlands, in the UK, over and over and over, it comes up that there are these disagreeable men who are gaining political power. And it's quite clear that when the current old people who are in charge of the EU are gone, then Europe is going to have quite a reaction to the last, 70 years. And again, you could say, like, okay, that's a generational thing, but it's sort of the same thing of this idea of wave propagation that occurs over time. And the AIs are actually now making it easier for us to see these things happening in real time, but you have to ask it in a particular way for a given knowledge space. It's basically like, tell me what thing everyone is currently believing about this space, and then tell me what people who've previously made predictions that are good in this space are now believing that's contrary to the general, viewpoint. And that is, an example of this, point representation rather than we're going to take some kind of linearization. So like, it's never going to be the case anymore that the government is going to create like an algorithm for deciding society, and sort of all the places where we deploy algorithms like that don't really make any sense. Like science and pharma is a great example. So we have this like bar for proof to show that the drugs work, but anyone who actually works with humans will tell you that the drugs work a little bit differently in every person because the context of every person is different. And so what we're looking for is just like enough of a signal at a group population level or statistical level that we can say that the drug works. When in fact, the basically that you're basically normalizing the local differences in the drug's performance and then trying to take a global snapshot, and that doesn't work because the normal local differences are sort of where all of the, obviously by definition, where all the variability happens, but that's where all the value is as well. And so as we get better data science and more open drug discovery, it's taking longer for drugs to get discovered because it's true that they don't work. Like they haven't worked for a long time. And so like the statistical, mushing that you have to do in order to make them look like they work, is increasing in complexity. Just like everywhere else, right? Polls don't work. There's a replication crisis all throughout science. It's just basically we got very good at tuning our reality to fit the algorithmic models, the linearization models. And reality is more complex than the linearization models. So like that's why this overfitting happened, and then we can't come back from it. All right, that was like way too long of a monologue. So let's check back in with Joe. So we're just gonna take a quick short break.
Okay.
There he is.
Yeah.
We had some
I
technical
think we're
difficulties there,
still
but
live streaming, but
we're
we lost
still
everyone.
live. Bring him back.
Yeah. Marvin came on just as I was coming off, which is a bit annoying. Yeah.
Put him in.
Yeah.
You missed my entire monologue about the nature of reality, so you're never
Yes.
going to see
Yeah.
it because you're not going to go back and watch it.
Do you have any tips about first? Well, I guess you do homeschooling, huh?
Do I have any tips about what?
About dropping off kids at preschool, but you do homeschooling.
Yeah, I mean, you shouldn't be sending your kids to preschool, but anyway, that's your own thing.
Okay. All right. Let me see if I get Marvin on again, or maybe he'll drop just.
Well, now that you dropped them off, right? So presumably you're going to be on for the next 20 minutes.
Yeah, maybe. I think we lost everyone. Let's do the next one next week. I think this is a bit of a mistake. Okay.
Wait, I don't understand. Why can't we have the conversation?
Some other stuff came up, and yeah, I already screwed up with getting the other people on as guests. So try next
Yeah,
week.
but who cares? Why don't we just talk about AI for 20 minutes and then hang out?
Because I'm still walking. We were just off air for like 10 minutes, and so we lost everyone. And
No, we were off air for 5 minutes. It's fine.
oh, was it? Okay.
Yeah, and everybody will see when they randomly come across the live stream, they'll see that there's people talking.
Okay. Let's see. Let's zoom in a bit. All right.
All right,
Cool.
so talk to me. What did you
So
think about?
Optimus is launching late 2027 maybe, but usually that gets delayed with Musk,
Yeah,
so
I
it might
think
be like 2030.
no,
Which
I
is
don't
what
think
I'm
it's that
saying.
late.
It's going to take years. Well, if we're
So I
5 years
think
late on Tesla FSD.
well, so I think that FSD, if FSD launches in June or July, things will happen on a different time schedule because they'll have a lot more money and a lot more support.
Yeah.
So number
Okay.
one, and the core technology, which is wayfinding, will be de-risked.
Okay.
Don't you think?
Yeah. Okay.
So I look at it. I look at
Mhm.
Optimus as being a function of two things. One is the software. Can it actually move through the environment safely and
Mhm.
pick stuff up? And with full self-driving, if that actually works, then there's a model for development for Optimus where you can use teleoperation to train it for basic tasks and then generate synthetic data from that. If you're going to use synthetic data or whatever, doesn't matter. Like there's a
Yeah.
path for it to work. The other side is the physical side. Part of the reason why Asimo didn't work 25 years ago was
Yeah.
because the motors and actuators were extremely expensive to build and very
Yeah.
fragile. Like they would fail
Okay.
after a few hours.
Yeah.
And so if the MTBF on your motors and actuators is 100 hours and you have 20 motors and actuators, then your bot doesn't work for more than 5 hours, right? That's
Mhm.
how math works. And so I think one of the big drivers for, so like what we're seeing a bunch of Chinese robotics companies, and it's not clear what the MTBF is for all the subcomponents in those devices. And so I think the big bottleneck for Tesla and the robots will actually be actuators and motors and that stuff, not necessarily the software. Although the software will be a moat for some amount of time.
Yeah, I don't know. It seems like it's possible to mass manufacture actuators. I mean, they're definitely important. You have to design something, but it's just pieces of metal and stamp them out by the billion.
Right. I'm
I
not
don't
saying
know.
they're not. I'm not saying they're not going to do that, but that seems like the limiting factor to me. Like how batteries were the limiting factor for the car, I think
Okay.
actuators will be the limiting factor for the
Hmm.
robots for a while.
Once they figure it out, but like they're still far from figuring out how to make the robots actually do useful things in complex scenarios. Like I was doing some housework the other day, and I realized like, wow, how is a robot going to figure out all these little things that make it good?
Yeah, I don't think that I think housework is going to be the last thing that they do, not the first thing. I think they are
Yeah.
selling the vision with housework and like laundry because
Well, even
that's
construction. Like, there's actually a lot of little things in construction,
I
especially given
again,
that it's like important to get it to work well, so
yeah,
it doesn't
so
fall over.
I definitely think building houses on flat ground that are like a very standard box house is much easier than like a complex remodel or something like that. But
Yeah.
even if you look at warehousing jobs where you're doing functionally pick and place,
Okay.
um, the robots are like if it can pick an egg up from one carton and put it in another carton, there's a ton of work for the robots to do.
Okay. Yes, the pick and place. There's surprisingly a lot of that. Yeah.
Yeah, I did a analysis for a client on that. There's something like 6 to 8 million jobs in the U.S. where 30 to 40% of the job is just pick and place.
Yeah. Nice.
So that's quite a lot of economic value that gets unlocked by reducing the cost of that from like $36 an hour to let's call it $5 to $10 an hour.
Yeah, I mean, it'll save you a few pennies on Amazon shipments. Like, does it matter so much?
Well, it'll matter to all those businesses. I don't know that it matters to the consumer. This is kind of like the tariff discussion, right? Is most people don't understand tariffs. And so they think that the consumer prices will go up because there's tariffs. And that does and doesn't happen. Like it's a more complicated situation than just input prices because it's a complex interdependent system.
Hmm. Yeah. Interesting.
Right. So my suspicion is that pick and place getting automated by a factor of 10 enables companies to do more interesting things. The other sort of thing that I read about for the humanoid robots is that we're considering them automating like dumb jobs that humans do today, but they can also automate jobs that simple robots do today. And so there's a lot of situations where you have a specialized capex to do something fairly simple that would be cheaper to have a humanoid robot do than to have the specialized capex. And so the actual design of your factory changes because the robots aren't just doing the work that humans are currently doing, they're also doing the work that more specialized capex is doing.
Like radioactive areas, or
No. I
specialized.
mean, like when you're in a manufacturing context, if you get to a certain volume, there is a rationale for creating a custom robot that's quite expensive to do that volume so that your variable cost goes down.
Yeah. Right.
And what I'm trying to say is that there's somewhere on that cost curve where having a humanoid robot do it is more economical for longer. So like you can't have humans do certain tasks because not because they're dangerous, but because they're repetitive and require a certain level of quality. But if the
Yeah.
humanoid robot doesn't suffer from fatigue and can maintain the same level of quality through its entire work cycle, then there's going to be situations where let's say for example a human could do 10,000 units per year and then it's economical to use a robot at 1 million units per year. So
Yeah.
there's this middle area where it's non-economical, but like maybe a humanoid robot is economical up to 2 million units per year, and then once you do more than 2 million then you go back to a specialized machine. So
Yeah.
there's this weird situation where you're extending what people can do, but then you're
Yeah.
also eating into what robots can do on the same side. And the ability to do that changes the entire design of your factory
Yeah.
because at that point now your factory is more generalizable, so you have less specific capex and more generalized capex in the form of the robots, and so
Yeah.
now you can build different components, right? Because the another thing that's quite complicated is that the more specialized capex you have, the harder it is to transition from one manufacturing output to another. But if you have a bunch of generalized robots, then it could be quite easy to transition from one manufacturing output to another because it's just a change in software.
Yeah.
So all of
Exactly.
manufacturing
Yeah.
changes.
Hmm. Are they gonna be trained by the workers or the management, or just figure it on their own, or
I,
programmed by an engineer?
Very
It feels
precise.
like it feels like it will be all of the above, but if you look at what Tesla and the other robot manufacturers are doing, they are doing teleoperation first.
Okay.
And so I think if there's a way to get actuarial feedback on teleoperation, so like not crush the egg when you pick it up, then there's a way to create a learning model from that to use it.
Okay. So that's where the teleop plays in, because
Yeah,
they will do it for their normal work, but then they don't realize they're just automating themselves at the same time.
right. But I mean, like, think about it this way. There's people in Bangladesh that would be happy to do $5 an hour pick and place for a factory in Ohio. The people in
Yeah.
Ohio now get to do more exciting work that's higher paid, potentially,
Yeah.
if you believe in
Potentially.
economics. And then, right, well, and it is a belief, right? It's not actually a thing. We kind of hope that it works. And those people in Bangladesh are happy to get $5 an hour. And so if it turns out that 2 years into those doing those $5 an hour, now there's enough nines in the probability of the pick and place automation system, then you don't need them to do pick and place anymore. But then you can have them do the next most complicated task, which is like if you look at an Amazon warehouse, they have these grids of boxes, and you like pick one up from way like up here, and then you move it over there, and then you pick one up from over here and you move it horizontally. That's a pick and place adjacent task, right? Whereas a normal pick and place task is there's a continuous line conveyor belt, there's shit on it that's of different kinds, and you pick it up and you place it into a box.
Yeah, it just seems, that'll happen pretty quickly, and then we'll start to automate more and more. That makes sense.
Yeah. It will also be the case, I think, that in construction, the robots will serve an advisory function before they serve the manual labor function. So you'll still have illegal Juan.
Management.
Yeah, but like in the field. So you'll still have illegal Juan doing the robotic plumbing, or excuse me, doing the plumbing, but the robot will make sure he's doing it to code.
You think that it will be a good GC doing it to code?
I think that
Contractor?
it will be easier. So like the robot will not necessarily be able to manipulate itself to do all the things that it needs to do under a house. It's an easier problem for it to watch a human being do that and then comment on the output.
Interesting. Someone who develops that could also sell that same solution to a city to actually do the inspections also.
Right, but the city, remember, is
code.
a government, and the point of the government is to create a jobs program for people.
I think a federal government can do that because it prints money. I don't know if that's true for city and state governments as much.
I don't know. I live in California. There's 225,000 people that work for the state of California. You couldn't tell me what 200,000 of them do from a add value perspective.
I don't think that there are a lot of services happening in California necessarily, but theoretically for 40 million people, that there should be plenty of work for them to do to keep the state running.
I understand, but like I said, there's 225,000 people, and I don't understand what 200,000 of them do. Like when you tell me this is what the state of California does, and you list it out, and then you say how many people are involved in that, it seems off by a factor of 10 at least.
Yeah, factor of 10.
Yeah.
This is state employees. Yeah, I'm not sure what specifically the state does. Roads, highways.
No, those are all contracted things.
Property taxes.
But do you need 200,000 people to collect property taxes?
I don't know. I have to do sometimes state like notary stuff, like all the documents, wills, birth certificates, things like that.
Right. And so you go into that office, and it's usually in an anchor city. In the state of California, we have like 15 anchor cities, and there's 30 to 50 people that you see.
Yeah.
That's a few thousand across the entire state that are doing, marriages, death, whatever, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
So what do the other 224,000 people do?
Yeah.
I think it's a real question. I don't know what they do. You can be like, well, they work for the DMV. You're like, okay, how many DMV offices are there? There's like 300. Each one again has like 30 to 50 people in it,
Yeah.
right?
Mm.
So like you just go down the line and you run out of people pretty quickly.
Yeah, I don't know what the other roles are. I assume it's public. Actually, their salaries are public also.
In theory.
Like in theory, they're not.
Well,
I
so
haven't looked.
this is a complicated question, right? So like when you try to figure out how much we spend per pupil in the public education system, the numbers are always different because the costs of the system are defrayed in different ways. They're like distributed through it's like in San Francisco where you live, there is in theory a budget for how much money they spend on homeless, but it's actually quite difficult to figure out what that is because some of the homeless budget goes over here with non-recurring emergency spending. Some of it goes over there with specific named programs. And then others of it is like it fans out to an NGO that then sponsors city workers. So it's actually quite complicated to decompose how people are paid. But it is
Mm.
true that the state of California reports that they have 225 or 235,000 people. And so my question is just like, what do those people do? I'm not. It's very confusing to me what they do.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, if a bunch of tech companies are firing people, then it seems like we could do a lot more with AI to do a more efficient government. Although if you have a smaller government, is it cheaper to bribe big parts of the government if there's a small number of people?
Yeah, I don't know. These are
Yeah.
sort of open questions.
Yeah. Having too much power in a fewer hands can be
Do you
bad
think
as
that
well.
do you think that AI will lead to smaller governments or bigger governments?
Uh,
What's your intuition there?
hmm. I think that AI will lead to more of the business. I mean, if we still have business, then businesses are going to be dependent a lot on IP. And so IP enforcement is going to be pretty important. So that would mean a lot more government, actually. We'll all be self-enforcing these kind of abstract rights.
Do you think we'll have businesses with hundreds of thousands of people if there's AI? Or do you think all businesses will be like 3 to 5 people?
I think it's an interesting model that Hollywood has had, where it's a bunch of small contractors and contracting firms that like come together to make a movie and then kind of split apart.
Yeah.
And that's been interesting. It's been confusing to me why big companies have so many employees. Actually, I didn't entirely understand why they need it. I think a lot of them are now realizing that as well.
I've spent my entire career asking that question. Why are there so many people working here? I don't understand what they do. Like at one point, I think Pinterest or Airbnb had like 20,000 employees, and I was extremely confused by that.
I don't think I have that many, but maybe a few thousand,
Have
five
have
thousand.
you been to Airbnb's headquarters? It's like 25 floors.
Oh, Airbnb, yeah. So I mean, at one point, the capital allocators in the markets invested in companies based on headcount. So like actually based on number of full-time employees, that limited the total value the company can have.
Man, if you ever needed a reason to understand that capital allocators in the public markets or whatever private markets are inefficient, there you go.
Yeah, that supposedly maybe has decoupled recently. So now they don't care as much about it. I think there is an advantage for big companies to have bigger headcount because they want redundancy. They don't want to be dependent on one person who does all of marketing, one person who does all of IT. Like you need like a backup for that person and probably a whole backup team for each subunit. So you end up having to blow it up just to prevent unionization. Basically, is one reason the companies are so big.
Interesting.
Hard to organize a big group of people. You can always scab within someone in each sector.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'll have to
Yeah.
give that thought. I've thought about how AI watches all the outputs for people, and so from a discernment standpoint, that problem of single point of failure is less of a problem. But I guess the
But
idea of
if you find
unionization,
it's not good enough, you'd have to. How do you replace them? Like you couldn't replace them overnight unless that person's already doing the whole job basically, and is already integrated and trusted and all that.
Yeah. So, I mean, that would be an argument for companies getting bigger as well.
Yeah.
So AI increases the size of companies and governments or decreases it? I think this is an open question for the audience.
Okay.
All right.
I have to
Me
go
too.
for a minute early, but good to see you.
Likewise.
Let's do
Talk
it again.
soon. Bye-bye.
All right.